Welcome, everyone, to the Energy Advisors Podcast. I'm your host, Rex, that energy guy. We've got a great episode for you today. I just think it's time to revisit some facts between, oh my goodness, combustion engines versus electric vehicles. And on the horizon, we have hydrogen cell vehicles. But before we go there, I'd like to remind you, because we all get busy, we don't have time, even though we might have notifications turned on or follow, we don't always have time to listen to everything. So the last episode that I did was a great interview with Zachary Christensen at Centrix Energy, and they're doing some really interesting things with innovations with energy efficiencies in buildings. So if you get a chance, listen to that. I want to thank our sponsors for the program today, our good friends at Power Solar. Listen, if you're going to do solar, there's only really one group to do it with. Nationwide coverage in 23 states, which gives you a big footprint, and they do it right. It's not just that they have one solution and jam it down your throat. You can get a solution tailored for your needs. So don't bother with the other guys. Go with Power. I'd love to have you get connected with them. Our other podcast partner is our good friends over at Universal Wind Kinetics. If you haven't looked at this technology, it's very interesting. It's like adding 4 solar panels for not a whole lot of money. These little small micro wind turbines you can put on your house, same type of thing, DC to AC. They're fantastic. It's up and coming, and you will be surprised at the technology. And of course, our good partners at Go Green Community Initiative. They are changing the way that people get education for renewables and helping people understand what's possible, what are the options, and what's the future look like. So Go Green Community Initiative. So if you'd like to get in touch with any of our partners, there's always links in the bottom of the videos and in podcast. And then also too, you go to the website energyadvisors.today. All right. Enough of all of that business. Get things out of the way. So, one of the worst things you can do sometimes is sort of peruse social media. And I just kind of chuckle because you see all these people that are posting opinions about things without facts. And I don't like to call it misinformation. I like to call it lack of correct information. And again, what I try to do here on the podcast is give you facts, not spin, and help people understand the dynamics. Reading headlines or going to the Instagram doctorate program doesn't make you an expert on it. And heck, I'm not an expert on it, but it does possibly set yourself up for a lot of incorrect information. All right, so let's go back and do a little bit of comparison from combustion engines to electric engines, electric vehicles. Okay, so combustion-based vehicles, electric vehicles, and then we're going to look a little bit forward into hydrocarbon cell vehicles that are on the horizon. All right, now a lot of people think that EVs are this new phenomenon, but it's not true. The original versions of EV vehicles actually started in 1830. Now, it really wasn't a vehicle, okay? It was like a wagon, and it was developed in Scotland, and it just really wasn't something that you go, wow, I'm going to throw my family in there and run around and get my groceries, okay? So it was in 1880 that we go back and look at the first development of the electric car, and they actually came out in the 1880s. There were some gentlemen over in Europe who were putting this together. And in 1885, we had the first combustion engine came out. And the only company that has been in business that entire time, it was done by Benz, our good friends over at Mercedes-Benz. So the founder of Mercedes-Benz was actually the first company to put a combustion engine into place. Now, let's talk about some interesting facts. At the turn of the century, at 1900, there were actually more electric vehicles on the road than there were combustion engines. Wow, okay. Well, a lot of people don't know that. Heck, I live here in Denver, and there was a very popular manufacturer of EV cars here in Denver, and it's down there by the Fillmore. Interesting stuff, but that's another day for another story. So at the turn of the century, let's just validate this, the turn of the century, that's when there were more electric vehicles than there were combustion vehicles. But the things flip-flopped and changed. Now, see if this sounds familiar. The adoption of electric vehicles was primarily in urban areas, okay? And, when Thomas Davenport and Robert Anderson put this together, it was in urban areas. Wealthy people had them, and it had some headwinds. The headwinds, sound familiar? Fact that there was not charging stations readily available. There were not parts that were readily available. And the issues that people bought EVs for back in the 1880s through the about 1925 is they wanted cleaner vehicles, less emissions. They wanted something that was modern. Okay. Wow. Wonder where we've heard that story lately. Okay. Now the combustion engines came along in 1885. Again, Mr. Benz put those out on the marketplace, but it was behind. But the flip were a couple market factors. Okay. So why it went to combustion engines. And sometimes it's not the best technology. It's some market dynamics. Okay. So the first one was those headwinds that were against the electric vehicles. And primarily it was distribution of power to be able to charge them. Remember, a lot of cities weren't even electrified at this particular point in time. The second thing was affordability. These combustion engines vehicles came out, and it wasn't superior technology. It was just more affordable. Okay. But the number one reason was, well, there's two. There was a gentleman by the name of Rockefeller who had a little small company called Standard Oil. And if you do analysis and comparison of value of the dollar of the day, it is basically figured out that Rockefeller was the all-time richest person that ever lived. And what he understood was the fact that it was very inexpensive to take gasoline and distribute it. And so you could take a truck and put it everywhere, and easy to put tanks in and easy to pull it out. So the availability of fuel was one of the driving factors that changed the marketplace. Now, I'll give you my own personal experience. I'm in my late 50s, all right? And when I was growing up, my grandfather had a very large ranch, and he had a 500-gallon gasoline tank at his ranch. And we filled up the tractors with that. And I can remember at the ripe old age of 8 years old being proud enough that I could fill not only the tractors, but I could fill 4 or 5 5-gallon gas cans and was strong enough to lift them and put them in the truck, the pickup, and then drive them out to the field so we could refuel the tractors during the day. Now, driving them out to the field, that was me, 8 years old, out on a farm in the sand hills of Nebraska. That's just what we did. So that's an example, a very crude example, but you understand it was easy to distribute gasoline. Okay, but here is another big kicker that happened, and it has to do with electricity. Okay. In 1912, Cadillac brought to the marketplace the first electric starter. This became a huge nail in the coffin. All right. Prior to 1912, if you wanted to get your car started, what'd you have? It was a hand crank. Now, do you think mama wants to go out? Now, again, there weren't paved streets. We didn't have paved driveways unless you're very rich. You think mama wanted to go out in her hoop skirt that nearly drug the ground and possibly in the mud, and then sat there and cranked on the vehicle? No, it wasn't a good solution. And heck, dad didn't want to even go do that. I wonder how many people fell on their high knees trying to get their vehicle started. But the electrical started, made it so now these gas-powered vehicles were even easier to operate. So you take the combination of Standard Oil being able to distribute gas around the country. You look at the cost because Cadillac, General Motors, Ford were bringing to the marketplace very affordable vehicles with the Model T, and then the advent of the electric starter. Now, at that time, and it's still in the top 5 models, I think it is, the Ford Model T was the number one selling vehicle at that time. Ford put its first electrical starters on the Model T starting in 1919. Okay, and then by 1926, the electrical starter was standard in all equipment. So again, it wasn't that it was a better technology. It was ease of use. It was access to the fuel supplies, and the fact that it was something that the average person can afford. Well, electric vehicles didn't go away. We've had them. It was just in the advent of rolling out of our good friends at Tesla, who popularized it because, again, what were people looking for? A clean vehicle that doesn't impact the environment. The ability to have a vehicle that doesn't have emissions, okay? And now we started to have electricity a lot more available, but still one of the headwinds that EVs still experience today is distribution of charging stations. They're not as prevalent as a gas station. You don't see them on every corner practically in a metropolitan area. And then when you go out in the remote areas, sometimes along some paths, it's difficult to find one or capacity there. So a headwind that's existed in 1900, 125 years later, practically. Okay. Then cost. Back around the turn of the century, it was only the wealthy that had these. Well, you could argue, the prices are coming way, way down in EVs. And again, I'm not against either technology. We need both. I see the value of the um, transition into more and more electric vehicles. So people just need to look at the facts. So instead of posting your favorite meme and making these suggestions that it's all or nothing in any direction, a lot of it has to do with market dynamics. Okay. Well, what's on the horizon? Mercedes-Benz, and they've decided that they are going to switch their focus over to hydrogen cell vehicles. Impressive technology. I've got an episode coming up on them, real deep dive, exciting technology. But what are the headwinds? Well, it's a repeat that we have with EVs. Cost, distribution of fuel, and then also efficiencies that have not been shrunk down. So you're still having to have a very big tank to do that. So I just tell people to pause and take a look at this. You got to go down the middle and understand we're going to need all of these, okay? And there are use cases for every type of vehicle, whether it's a combustion engine, whether it is a hybrid, whether it is a EV, or in the future, a hydrogen cell. Because not every use case makes sense for everybody. If I live out in an area where I'm 400 to 500 miles from a metropolitan area, the use case for an EV just might not be practical at that point in time. Now, what's good, and I'm all for it, our government is providing tax credits to help afford these technologies. Prices are coming down in EVs. Unfortunately, for our giants in the marketplace, there is a lot of pressure coming from China, from BYD, because their cost of labor is nothing compared to the vehicles which are produced in the United States. So it's never that simple. So what I would recommend people to do, hey, I think you all know how to use Google. Hey, I think you all know how to use Google Alerts. Do your homework. Don't just out there spouting off things, barking at the moon without the facts, because everybody wants a cleaner world. Nobody gets up and says, I want a dirtier lake, or I want the oceans to be depleted. I want the air to be bad, or I want more trash on the streets. Nobody says that. So I just don't think we can be extreme in any direction when we are looking at these technologies, we need to look at the facts and understand that. So just a ditty to catch people up, take some time to do some research, be practical about these things. The use cases have to make financial sense. Okay. It's not an all or nothing solution. So I see a world over the next 10 years where we still have combustion engine vehicles for the right use cases. I see EVs for the right use cases, and I see hydrogen cell vehicles too. And I don't ever want to see people get into the argument because it's too hard to defend. Oh, the cost of mining, the manufacturing, recycling, all of these technologies have similar footprints when you look at that. So it's just the people who have incorrect information who jump on bandwagons and make statements without really looking at the facts. Well, that's all I got for you today. Thanks for listening in wherever you are around the planet. We ask you to, if you're following on the video platforms, to subscribe and hit notifications. And if you are listening in on the podcast platforms, that you follow. So until next time, thanks and make it a great day.